The child's bedroom was always too cold. Even in the height of summer, when the rest of the house sweltered beneath the sun's glare, that room clung to a damp, unnatural chill. The night light, a small plastic moon, cast feeble yellow light across the walls, stretching shadows into elongated, grasping fingers. And then there was him. Every night, like clockwork, the boy would wake to the weight of eyes upon him. His breath would hitch, his fingers twisting into the sheets as he forced himself to look. There, at the foot of his bed, stood the shadow. Tall. Impossibly tall. A silhouette blacker than the darkness around it, with no face, no features, just the awful, unwavering sense of being watched. At first, he told himself it was a dream. A trick of the light. But when he woke screaming for the third time that week, his parents exchanged weary glances. Night terrors, his father said, ruffling his hair. Asterisk, you'll outgrow them. Asterisk, his mother left the hall light on, as if brightness could banish what lurked in the corners. It didn't. The shadow stayed. Years passed. The boy grew, but the visits never ceased. He learned to lie still, to pretend to sleep as the figure loomed over him, its presence pressing down like a physical thing. Then, on his 12th birthday, an old friend of his grandmother's came to visit, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like dry leaves. She took one look at his bedroom and went very still. "You've seen him, then," she said. Not a question. The boy's blood turned to ice. The woman sighed, her gaze drifting to the foot of the bed. Asterisk, the man who lived here before, he lost his mind after his wife left. Used to stand just like that, watching his children sleep. One night, he just never woke up. Asterisk, she hesitated. Asterisk, they found him right where you're standing now. Asterisk. The boy followed her stare, to the warped floorboard at the foot of his bed. The one that always creaked, no matter how lightly he stepped. That night, for the first time, he didn't wait for the shadow to appear. He already knew who it was. The first time she heard it, Emily thought it was the house settling. A faint shh, like fabric brushing against plaster. She pressed her ear to the flower-patterned wallpaper of her childhood bedroom, holding her breath. Silence. Then, there. A whisper so soft it might have been her imagination. But it wasn't. Night after night, the sounds grew clearer. Not the creaks and groans of an old house, but voices. Muffled, as if speaking through layers of cotton. Words she couldn't quite make out, until one winter evening, frost etching the windows, they sharpened into a sentence. Asterisk, I see you. Asterisk. Emily jerked back from the wall so fast she hit her headboard. The room was empty. The house, quiet. But the words clung to her, oily and cold. Her parents dismissed it. Just the wind, her father said, tapping the radiator. Asterisk, pipes playing tricks. Asterisk, but pipes didn't whisper back when you whispered to them. Pipes didn't giggle when you cried. By her 10th birthday, Emily had developed a ritual, blankets pulled over her head, a flashlight clutched in her fist, her back never to the wall. The whispers had grown bolder. Sometimes they mimicked her mother's voice. Sometimes they just watched. She could feel it, the prickle of eyes on her skin, though the walls were smooth and blank. Years passed. Emily moved out, went to college, tried to forget. But when her parents decided to renovate, she came home, and arrived just as the contractors made their discovery. They'd torn out the old plaster in her bedroom, revealing a gap between the walls. A narrow crawl space, barely wide enough for a child. And inside, a nest of yellowed newspapers. A crusted tin cup. A single, small shoe. And on the back of the wallpaper, where no one had ever thought to look, scribbled in pencil. Asterisk, I see you too. Asterisk. The antique mirror had always felt wrong. 7-year-old Jamie couldn't explain why he hated the ornate oval mirror hanging opposite his bed. Maybe it was how the gilded frame seemed to swallow the light. Or how his reflection sometimes moved a half-second too slow. But every night, his mother insisted, asterisk, it was your great-grandmother's. It stays. Asterisk. Then the visits began. Jamie would wake with a start, his skin prickling with the certainty of being watched. Moonlight bled through the curtains, painting silver stripes across his bedroom. And there, in the mirror, a face stared back. His face. But not quite. While Jamie's body lay motionless in bed, his reflection's eyes were wide open. Glossy black pupils tracked his slightest movement. Some nights, its lips twitched into a smile far too knowing for a child. Other nights, it simply watched as Jamie's breath came in ragged gasps, too terrified to scream. His parents dismissed it as sleepwalking. The school counselor suggested an overactive imagination. But when Jamie's grandmother visited from Sicily, she took one look at the mirror and crossed herself so violently her knuckles cracked. Specchi sono porte, she whispered. Mirrors are doors. She pressed a trembling hand to the glass. It fogged beneath her palm, except in one spot, where the cold surface remained untouched. The exact shape of a small, child-sized handprint. Something has been using your reflection to practice being human, she said. Asterisk, the more you look, the better it learns. Asterisk. That night, Jamie's grandmother covered the mirror with a black cloth. The next morning, they found the fabric shredded on the floor. And in the mirror's dusty surface, 2 fresh handprints, one large, one small, pressed against the glass from the inside. Every night at 9:37 p.m., the blanket would lift. 8-year-old Sarah would lie perfectly still as icy fingers brushed her shoulder, gently pulling the quilt up to her chin. The scent of lavender and mothballs would linger for just a moment before fading into the darkness. Thanks, Mom, she'd murmur into her pillow. Except sometimes, her mother would appear in the doorway minutes later, yawning, asterisk, time for bed, sweetheart. Asterisk. The realization came on a Tuesday. Sarah woke to the familiar tug of blankets, but this time, something felt wrong. The hand lingered too long. The fingertips dragged across her collarbone, brittle, like dried twigs wrapped in parchment. Her eyes flew open. A skeletal hand, yellowed nails catching the moonlight, was withdrawing into the shadows near her closet. The arm it belonged to stretched back impossibly far, disappearing into the darkness where no wall should have been. Sarah stopped sleeping with blankets after that. Years later, when the old woman next door brought over a box of her late mother's things, she mentioned offhand, asterisk, your house used to have the kindest nanny. Miss Ada. Tucked all the neighborhood children in when their parents worked late. Died right in that back bedroom, you know. Pneumonia. Asterisk. Sarah's blood turned to ice. That night, out of habit, she left her blanket folded at the foot of the bed. She awoke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of rustling fabric. The quilt hovered in midair, being carefully, tenderly, drawn up over her legs by invisible hands. And this time, Sarah didn't pull away. The closet door was always 3 inches ajar. No matter how many times 6-year-old Daniel shoved it closed before bed, he'd wake to find that narrow sliver of darkness staring back at him. And sometimes, when the moonlight hit just right, he'd see the pale fingers curled around the door's edge. The first time he saw the boy's face, it was 2:03 a.m. according to his glow-in-the-dark dinosaur clock. Just one wide eye peering through the gap, unblinking. A shock of matted brown hair. lips slightly parted as if frozen mid-whisper. "Go away." Daniel had screamed, burying himself under his Power Ranger sheets. By morning, his parents dismissed it as nightmares. But the sightings continued, always at the same time, always with that same hollow stare. When Daniel's little sister Emma moved into the room next door, he thought he was finally too old for imaginary friends. Until he heard her giggling at 2 a.m. "Emma? Who are you talking to?" "The boy in your closet," she said matter-of-factly. "He says his name is Thomas. He's looking for his mommy." The air left Daniel's lungs. 20 years later, while renovating the childhood home for his own family, Daniel found the newspaper clipping tucked behind the closet's baseboard. The yellowed page showed a grainy photo of a missing boy, brown hair, gap-toothed smile, last seen wearing striped pajamas. The date, October 17, 1963. As Daniel's trembling fingers traced the headline, the closet door behind him creaked open. Just 3 inches. And from within the darkness, something sighed.